we here together on Friday? We're not. We're going to be online on Friday. We're going to try this week and next week and see how things continue to go. So guys, just a reminder, this Friday, we have two things to do. Your environments of business exercise and your LinkedIn page. Let's say your LinkedIn page, you don't get a perfect score. How can you get a perfect score on your LinkedIn page? Fix everything I ask you to fix, and I will review it. Now, what will happen as we get into the semester, I won't let that go on forever. We'll go for about a week or two where I'm still giving you suggestions. At some point, we have to cut it off, but I'll keep working with you as long as you're working. Yes, sir? Yeah, here's what you need to do with your LinkedIn page. Here's your whole assignment. You create your page, go down the score list in terms of the assignment sheet, everything you need to do. For example, you need to have a picture, you need to have a headline, you need to have a write-up about yourself, and you do two things. Look me up on LinkedIn and send me a friend request. So I'll be your first connection. Now keep in mind, after we're connected, if you decide you don't want to remain connected to me, you don't have to, but that shows me you know how to use the system. And the other is to get your customized web URL, your web address for your page. You're going to copy and paste that into Canvas, and you're going to send that to me in Canvas to show me you've done the assignment. Does that all make sense, guys? What question?
You just want us to put that link in the little comment thing?
Yep, copy and paste it right into the comments. Any questions about that, guys? Going once, going twice. And the environments of business, we did that together last week, so I'm asking you to pick your own company, your own service industry to do the environments of business and tell me the positives and negatives. Take a look at that. If you have any questions, hit me up on that as well. We're still in a pretty relaxed state of mind because we're early in the semester, so we're going to be taking our time with this stuff. Guys, we're going to be starting today talking about economics and economic systems. So there are three major economic systems in the world. We're going to be talking about all three of them. And we're going to also be talking about the differences between types of economics. By chance, are any of you economics majors? Ma'am, if you were putting it in your own words, how would you describe economics? What is economics? That's a great description. So how businesses work. One of the things I like to call it is how, if we think of money as blood, how blood moves through a circulatory system. So economics is a circulatory system where money or capital flows through that system. So we're going to be talking about that today. Now, this is not an economics class. How many of you are also in Econ 101? So you're going to be getting more detail there, but we're going to be talking more about how this fits into business in general. And by the way, economics is a great major. It's one of these things, if you enjoy research, if you enjoy knowing how things work, if you enjoy knowing how to predict when the next recession is going to be, it's a very cool major. So when we start talking about economics, what we're talking about is how money moves through an organization, or through a country, I should say. There's all kinds of things that affect economics. Politics affect economics. Policy affects economics. How we feel affects economics. For example, we talk about all these scientific terms. How can our personal feelings, the mood we are in a given day, affect the way we spend money? Yes? Yeah, if we are in a situation where we're not feeling good, maybe we're not feeling good about the state of the country, maybe we're not feeling good about our own paycheck, we're less likely to buy. For example, if you want to know why Amazon has one-click purchasing, they want people who have that moment where they give in to making that spontaneous purchase. They want to make it as easy as they can. But our mood can affect the economy. If we're looking at macroeconomics, we're looking country as a whole, how are we doing? Microeconomics means we're going to a particular place in the country, and we're looking how that economy is doing. Let me give you an example of how that could be different, guys. If we look at the country as a whole, you know, the average, and I could be a little off on this, but I'm betting the average wage in the country, the average person, if you took all the income in the United States, the average person probably makes around $40,000 to $45,000 a year. If you go to Cambria County, where we are located here at St. Francis, I think the median household income is around $30,000 a year. If you go to Los Angeles, the median household income is going to be significantly higher. But in addition, what's different, if I'm living in Los Angeles, Or if I'm living in Evansburg, what's different? You got it. Even getting to work costs more. When gas was going through the roof back in like 2008, 2009, it was hitting $5 a gallon on the West Coast. So if you know anybody who was out there, they were paying more for fuel than anybody. So there's a reason why we can be in an economic recovery where everybody's doing great and the markets are killing it, but yet in your backyard it can feel like you're still in a recession because micro and macro are not the same things. Well, then we get into the differences between economic systems. This is a little hard to read, so we're going to talk about the differences between capitalism, communism, socialism, and what we also refer to as mixed economies. If I say the United States is capitalist, we're a free market, what do I mean by that? Yes?
It means that the market's free so that the government and like people can still operate around it, but the businesses are like privately owned and they own the resources that they produce.
You nailed it, man. So you can own a business. There's nothing to stop you from owning a business in this country. There's nothing to stop you from competing with somebody else. There's nothing to stop you from putting out your own shingle. Now, that being said, there is some government intervention. There's no such thing as any system that is truly pure. When we talk about capitalism, we still pay taxes. We still have laws. Same with communism and socialism. But capitalism is pretty cool. I think it is anyway. That's my favorite economic system. Some people may disagree, and that's okay. I want you to have your own opinion on this stuff. Guys, somebody tell me another advantage of capitalism. Who benefits from capitalism? Yep, tell me more about that.
Well, if the people can like start their own businesses, they can generate their own revenue.
So you're free to make as much money as you want. That's definitely a benefit of capitalism. From this side of the room, we need to hear from you guys today, too. What's another benefit of capitalism? What's good about our free market? Yes? You can make as many piles of money as you want. Here's my favorite analogy for what's so awesome about capitalism. How many of you guys love ice cream? Raise your hand if you love ice cream. Oh, what's your favorite flavor? Mint chip. Who else? What's your favorite flavor? Oh, you guys are all about the chocolate and the flavors. How about over here? Somebody tell me their favorite flavor. What's your favorite flavor? Loose Tracks. Oh, all that chocolate. It's so full of calories. Here's what I love about ice cream in America. I'm going somewhere with this. Right now, I'm a giant eagle, and this is the ice cream aisle. And I can go the whole way. There's Moose Tracks. There's mint chocolate chip. I think there's some cookies and cream out here, too. Oh, I found a Neapolitan. There's push-up bars, ice cream sandwiches. There's a shit ton of ice cream out there. There's a lot of ice cream out there. So we have ice cream aisles as long as our buildings. And the reason we have that in capitalism is because we have selection, because companies compete with each other. That's one of the best parts about capitalism. It's not all wine and roses. There are problems. There are downsides to capitalism, too. What are some of the downsides? What could be a disadvantage for us in capitalism? Yes?
Well, with competition being a good thing, it can also be a bad thing for the smaller businesses.
It's tough. Who suffers? Like, when a Walmart comes to an area, who suffers? They can't compete. They can't compete on price. They can't compete on selection. It's very tough for them. So competition can be brutal. No two ways about it. Is there another downside to capitalism? What's another downside from this side of the room here? What could be a problem in capitalism? Yes? Yeah, you can certainly get monopolies. You can have, although technically they're supposed to be illegal, they happen all the time. Let me give you a great example here. How many of you in the winter have natural gas in your homes? You know? Yeah. How many of you have a choice between more than 2 internet providers where you live? How many of you have a choice between what water company you get the water from? There are monopolies still in the United States, so that can happen as well. In addition, if I lose my job in a capitalist economy, I get unemployment, but does that last forever? It does not. And in terms of free healthcare, that does not exist in our country. So capitalism means a lot of services aren't typically available. Now, there are countries like the UK and Canada that are capitalists and have free markets and still do have universal healthcare, but generally speaking, you have those as disadvantages. Now you have lots of incentives in capitalism. The harder you work, the more money you can make. But there are downsides as well. Let's talk about communism. Communism is kind of the polar opposite of capitalism. In capitalism, we're going back there for a second, how do we determine how much product to make? If you own a company, how much product do you make? Yes. People want it, you make it. And you don't make too much because you want to keep the price up, supply and demand. If you're in a communist economy, who decides how much product we're making? You got it. If you're in a communist economy, who decides what that product looks like? The government. Guys, it's one of these things where the government owns basically everything. Communism is really having a tough time surviving in its pure form because it simply doesn't economically work most of the time. The last purely communist country, the one who came closest to the definition of communism, will probably be Cuba. What's happened in Cuba over the last 20 years? What's happened to the economy there? Anybody know?
They're spending like all their money on the military.
And they're also not getting subsidies. They were being propped up by the Soviet Union. So essentially, the largest communist country in the world, well, the most powerful anyway, China's technically the largest, but the Soviet Union was backing up Cuba. They were giving them tons of money to prop up their economy. And when they quit doing that, Cuba was all of a sudden starting to hurt. Cuba is even allowing for some private businesses to open right now. Let's say, for example, from the time we're born, we get assigned a job. We don't necessarily get to work harder. If we all are assigned the same job, and we're all guaranteed the same wage, is anybody going to work harder? No. Why am I going to work any harder than I have to when I'm making the same wage as the person next to me who does not care? If I come up with a cool, creative idea, do I get to profit from it? I do not. And then we get into socialism. Now, socialism is the most complex of the three to understand. It's easy to understand capitalism. We've got the idea of a free market. We've got the idea that I can create wealth for myself. I can work as hard as I want to. I don't have as many safety nets. Communism, yes, everybody gets a job. Everybody gets taken care of equally. That doesn't mean we're all getting taken care of wonderfully. It means we're supposed to be equal. And socialism, we get into the idea that we're going to be heavily taxed to pay for lots of benefits. If you get into countries, for example, like France, if you have a baby in France, they'll provide daycare for you. You get free health care. You get more government intervention in your life, sometimes for the positive. Who doesn't like free health care? The negative part of it is you're paying taxes that are very high. You're also getting into the idea, for example, in many socialist countries, for example, in England, who owns the broadcast networks? It's got a free market, but it's got socialism in there too. The free market controls their markets, but the British Broadcasting Company, the BBC, is owned and controlled by the government. If you get into many areas, for example, one of the best examples of socialism in the 21st century was Venezuela. What was Venezuela's biggest export? Anybody have any idea? That's a good guess, because it's the right part of the world. But let me give you a hint. Anybody ever hear of the company Citgo? What does Citgo sell? They sell gas. Their biggest export was gasoline. Here's what happened. There was a guy named Hugo Chavez who was essentially the president for life of Venezuela. And he, during the height of gas prices, took over and socialized the petroleum industry in Venezuela. So the government took it over. They took all the money from what they were selling in gas at high prices and put it back into the government to provide high degrees of services. So he was able to do that, but what happened when the price of gas tanked? So did their economy. Guys, if you have a laptop, you're welcome to look it up. You should check out the inflation rate in Venezuela right now. People can't afford toilet paper. People can't feed themselves because they did not have a free market that was able to adapt to this. Yes?
How do you get your inflation rate? How do you figure that number out?
Well, we're going to talk about inflation later in this chapter, but what inflation, it's one of these things that gets very misunderstood. All inflation is the increase of prices over time. It's not always a bad thing either, but we're going to talk about that. Yes, sir?
So in 2019, the inflation rate was 9,586%.
And in the United States, if we hit...
That was in Venezuela.
Yes, in the United States, if we hit 10%, we're in a bad spot. And these guys are 9,000%. Guys, that's what happened in Germany in the lead up to World War II. So we're talking about a country that's literally coming apart at the seams. Yes.
So what's considered to be hyperinflation?
That anytime you're getting past double digits, if you're getting into triple digits in terms of rate, you're into hyperinflation. They're in a, let's just put it in this place. There's a 4-letter word you'd say that they are right now, and that's what they are. They are blanked. So I don't know how that country is going to recover, and somebody else will have to come in and try to straighten it out.
It ended in 2016. Ever since then, the overall inflation rate has increased to 53,798,500.
What happens to currency at that point? We're going to talk about currency and exchanges. What happens at that point? Exactly right. So if you and I live in Venezuela, for example, now let's say, I don't know, I've got a couple of cans of gas, and you're raising tomatoes, and I need to feed my family. It makes more sense for me to barter with you at that point than to try to spend money. So essentially, your currency becomes worthless, and that's exactly what's happening in many places when they get to hyperinflation. What do they start trading with if they are using money at all? They start either bartering or they start using U.S. dollars, because U.S. dollars are worth more than their own currency. We're going to talk more about that. But you guys with me so far? Okay. Then we get into something called a mixed economy, guys. Mixed economies are what we're dealing with in places like China and, get this, in the United States. For example, although I would say if you ask me what is our economic system, I would definitely say capitalism, with a couple of caveats. Guys, a couple of caveats are, yes, we have elements of socialism in our system. Did you guys, when you drove to St. Francis, did you have to pay to be on most of the roads you were on? Turnpike, right? Okay. Other than the turnpike, if you're driving from here to Evansburg, is there a toll on that road? There's not, because your tax dollars pay for it. Tax dollars pay for certain services. So we are not pure capitalism, although we're pretty darn capitalist. China is also a mixed economy these days, because although the Communist Party rules China, and especially from a social level they rule China, let's see if you know this. Does China have a stock market?
Yes.
Yeah. That means they got a free market. Now, the question of how much government intervention happens there is a whole other discussion. But we're seeing more and more mixed economies these days because the free market has proven to be very effective. Yes, sir?
So, is North Korea the most communist country?
Here's why I would argue no. Because I think they're a dictatorship, for sure. They are dangerous to world security. They are. But Kim Jong-un, who was his father? Kim Jong-il. They're a monarchy, essentially. So we're talking about something, if you go back to, for example, the original tenets of Marxism, which became, essentially communism, it was the idea of equitable distribution of wealth. We all work together for the People's Party and for the country. He saw it as a utopia of sorts. What he didn't account for, in my opinion, you guys can feel free to disagree. I will never tell you if you should like this or not. I don't think he accounted for human nature. That's what I think.
Is that?
Oh, yeah, so to go back to North Korea, Kim Jong-un, the current leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-il was his father. So when his father died, his son got control of the country. And in communism, you're supposed to have a lot. Oh, yeah, he's dead. The old man is dead.
No. There was like a thing that came out like a few months ago that said he was in a vegetative state.
I don't think he's a leader no more, though.
Kim Jong-un is still the leader,
I
but
think his sister or something taken over.
you think so?
Yeah, there's something that he came. I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
Something like
I-
TMZ
There was a
came
picture
out.
released of him recently where he was alive.
Oh, really?
Hopefully,
He is not the healthiest
They
looking
said,
guy.
they said he stepped down because of his health. So his sister was trying to take over now.
his sister's apparently like crazy worse.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, but it's still in the bloodline. We still have a royal system here.
So
is
where
what
would
we're
they
talking
fall under here?
What they would fall in is something that isn't even on this chart because it's a monarchy. Because in the world, how many true monarchies still exist? Is Great Britain really a monarchy? It's symbolic. In North Korea, it's real. And if you guys ever get a chance, there's a bunch of great documentaries about North Korea. As much as we say North Korea is a threat, we should feel sympathy for the poor people who are stuck in that country. And the fact that you're talking about people who literally have to go to black markets to barter for basic necessities. And I'm not kidding. There's two justice policies in North Korea. These are absolutely true policies. One is, if I commit a crime, they punish 3 generations, which means if I get convicted of a crime against the state, they can throw my father and my son in jail with me. And they literally do have state-sanctioned hairstyles. You literally can get arrested and thrown in jail for having the wrong haircut. And it's all these bizarre policies, yes.
Have you ever seen satellite images of South Korea and like all around it, and then you like at night you see South Korea like it's
lit up.
It's lit up all the internet, and then you just like right above it is North Korea, and there's literally not just pure black. Nothing. They don't have internet. They don't have anything.
Just imagine if you're in North Korea looking down across the border and see what's feet away from you. It's a terrible existence. I feel for those folks. I really do. So that being said, I think it's important to remember sometimes this is as political as I'm going to get today. Sometimes other governments are our enemies or are people we're not getting along with. That does not mean their people are bad people. So always remember that, because a lot of those folks are prisoners of their own systems as well. Just to kind of round it off too, in terms of who's managing companies and wealth capitalism, we are. If you have a publicly owned company, you sell stock in your company, your board is helping manage that. In communism, the party itself manages the economy and who's getting what. This is why there are all kinds of shortages, for example, in communist countries. Socialism, there are some small businesses that do their own thing, or medium-sized enterprises, but large companies are still controlled by the government, especially if we get into like utilities, things like that. And mixed economy, again, we have a mixed economy. We're still more capitalistic. If you ask me in the United States, I will say capitalism, but there is some private sector involvement. By the way, guys, in the world right now, who's the biggest auto market? You guys are all having good guesses here.
That's London and the U.S. like when they overlap.
Those are all really good guesses, but it's China. Because since China has started getting a middle class now, some people are allowed to experiment with a free market. More Chinese consumers are able to buy automobiles. So, for example, the Beijing Auto Show about 4 years ago took over the Detroit Auto Show as the biggest in the world. So more cars are being sold in terms of growth rates. And in terms of steady growth, capitalism's looking good. Communism is not looking good for the future, guys. And again, socialism, it all depends who you talk to, what their beliefs are on the outcome. Because there are people in this country, for example, who believe in socialist principles as well. And here's the thing. When we start talking about politics in this country, there are a lot of people who are supporters of Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders is a proponent of a lot of socialist ideas. If you believe that, I support you in your belief. You can believe whatever you want, and I encourage you to make choices based on that, because I think there are ethical people in all of these systems. For me, I like capitalism. You're actually going to be, at some point in this class, writing a paper, a small paper, about what economic system you believe in and why. If you completely disagree with me on everything I just said, you can still get an A on the paper. I want to hear what you have to say about it. For example, a lot of people in this country believe we should have universal health care. Some people don't believe that. That is something we'll also talk about, why we do and why we don't. So, before we move on, guys, I've been talking a lot today. Can I get a question or a comment from somewhere in the room? Not anything. What would you guys like to talk about?
Can you explain why China has the biggest market again?
Here's what happened. Let's say, for example, and I apologize, this is going to be a little bit of a long answer to a short question, but for the longest time, because China is the most populous country in the world, they've got, I think, and I'll probably get this wrong, right around 3 billion people. They're a big country. And so they had what they referred to as a one-child policy for the longest period of time. Have you guys heard about this? Yeah, so you're only allowed to have one child. And the reason why, they were trying to slow the growth of the population. Well, here's what happened. As a result, and this is unfortunate, but it's just a part of the reality. Because people wanted to pass on family names, male children were more prized than female children were. And as a result, the birth rate went down because there were no females for all the single males to marry and have children with. China realized the error of their ways, and they started encouraging people to have more children. And at the same time, as the population was growing, they also opened up their markets to a little bit of a free market. Meaning, we're still going to control a lot of things about your life, but we're going to allow you to make more money in a performance-type system like the West, In other words, if you work harder, you can make a little more money. We're going to allow some people to own companies, even though we're still communist. And we're going to have a free market, i.e. the stock market, so I can make more money. All of a sudden, this middle class emerged, kind of like it did in the United States in the 1950s. And all of a sudden, people have more money to spend. And all of a sudden, wow, not only can we afford a house, we can afford a car too. And it's simply a numbers game. There are more consumers in China than there are in the United States. It's just a game of numbers. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
By the way, guys, in terms of the 21st century, I may have mentioned it earlier in this class, what is going to be the big growth continent in the world for the economy in the 21st century? It's going to be Africa. Because we got a highly skilled workforce. In some parts of Africa, for example, the majority of the populations in given areas are 25 years old or younger, which means we got a young, creative population. But I digress. Other questions before I continue?
This is more of a fun question.
Ask me a fun question.
Going back to the internship.
The interview, you mean?
Yeah,
The interview. There's an interesting story about that movie. Do you remember why it became so famous?
Well, didn't they get in trouble? Or like North Korea got really mad about it?
Here's what happened with the movie The Interview, because this goes into business too. Believe it or not, we're talking politics, but it goes into business. The Interview, how many of you have seen the movie? Okay, so you know the plot. You know, basically it comes down to the idea of a plot to assassinate a world leader, essentially Kim Jong-un. Now, first off, it was kind of noteworthy that we actually had a movie coming out talking about assassinating an existing leader. That was pretty controversial, was it not? And it was a comedy, Seth Rogen and James Franco and those guys. But what happened was North Korea was not happy about it. They basically said, look, this is an act of war, you're releasing this movie, so we're going to show you guys. And they essentially hacked into Sony's servers, Sony, the studio that produced it, and they started getting private information about thousands of Sony employees, including their social security numbers, which is the worst thing you can possibly lose on the internet, is your social security number. So this was an instance in which a state-run hacking group out of North Korea actually took on a private business in the United States as a political statement. Unprecedented. Never has happened before. And here's the other reason why this is important. By the way, these kinds of current events, when we talk about them, sometimes show up as bonus questions on the exam. The Interview was the first major, really big deal motion picture to be released on streaming, and essentially the same day as theaters. It had a limited theatrical opening because people were afraid that there were going to be bombings and everything else, so they released it on Prime, and you could buy it, and it came out at the same time for both. Changed the game for the streaming industry too. So, yes, I did hear about that one. Sorry about that. That was a long-winded answer. I'm in a good mood today, guys. I hope you guys are too. We're going to keep going. You guys probably noticed I'm not in a hurry. And the reason I'm not in a hurry, we're early in the semester, and we're getting into our rhythm. When we get into our second chapter, we'll probably move a little more quickly, but we're taking our time. So, guys, another term for capitalism in China, we talked about mixed economies. We can also call that state capitalism. And that means, for example, although we have capitalism in the United States, very little, relatively speaking, oversight from the government, where in China it's very heavy-handed oversight. China's also been accused of manipulating the value of their own currency to make it more attractive to do business with them. What I mean by that is we see what a dollar trades for versus, for example, the Japanese yen. We have differences in value, and China has been devaluing their own currency. Then we get into command economies. China is a state capitalist country, but it's also a command economy. All command economy means is that the government is regularly taking control over the economy. So to clear this up, you can have state capitalism. It is what it is, basically what it says here. State capitalism indicates a command economy, but a command economy does not always include state capitalism. So you can have a command economy that's purely communist, that is not state capitalism, i.e. Cuba. And again, capitalism, we generically refer to it as a free market economy, meaning you can buy and sell anything you want pretty much. So the way this stuff all fits together, guys, it's an ecosystem. When I say the word ecosystem, what does that word mean? from a scientific standpoint, what's an ecosystem? Yes.
It's like how all the living organisms in an environment operate on each other.
Exactly right. So we have the bigger fish that eat the smaller fish.
It's like food chain almost.
It's exactly like a food chain. And our economy is really not much different than all this. All these concentric circles, for example. We go back to what we refer to the resource markets, the 5 factors of production, whether we're using wood or coal or gasoline, whatever our raw materials are. Those things become raw materials that get processed into things that we can buy, whether they're goods like physical things or whether they're services. Those go out to the markets. And once they go out to the markets, they're purchased by consumers. So all of these things that are our inputs, again, our 5 factors of production, resources, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, all of these together produce the product. So we have inputs and we have outputs. The inputs are any of the raw materials. The inputs are the innovation. The inputs are the money. And the money is cyclical. Because, for example, if you're a business and you sell something for a profit, you spent money to make that product, and your profit comes back into the equation and produces more, and the cycle continues. Here's why it's complicated, other than the fact there's about 200 things on that diagram. Let me give you an example. I know we'll do a controversial question first, and then we'll give you kind of a little nuance to that. We have 2 big convenience store chains, the biggest 2 convenience store chains in Pennsylvania. It's not Rutter's, it's Sheetz and who else? Sheetz and Wawa. And people love Sheetz or Wawa. They don't love both. How many of you are Sheetz people? How many of you are Wawa people?
What is Wawa?
Wawa is a convenience store that's based out of the eastern part of the state. You like Wawa better? Why is Wawa better?
Well, we have a few sheets. My area is more brother versus sheets, so like our closest Wawa is about 30 minutes away.
Okay.
So it's more enjoyable since I don't have it all the time.
So it's rare.
Yeah.
It's rare. Why do you like Wawa better? Okay. So have you gone to a Sheetz since you've been here? Okay. Well, guys, I'm a diehard Sheetz fan just because I live in Altoona. I have to be. But for every dollar that Sheetz pulls in revenue, and they pull in a lot, they're a very busy company. What do they make in profit after they pay all their expenses and reinvest in the company for every dollar they pull in? Take a guess. How much? No, not even close. Not even close. They're making way less than half. For every dollar they pull in,
10 cents.
1. They're making 1 cent on the dollar in profit for every dollar they pull in. And that's not just because they're not making money, it's because they're reinvesting in their company. They're reinvesting in their people. That means, by the way, you're going to do a high volume business if you want to stay in. You may say to yourself, well, how does this work when a turkey sandwich costs $6? A lot of stuff goes into that turkey sandwich between the logistics, the touch screens, everything that makes that experience possible. We do a field trip about once every 1.5 to 2 years. And we actually go to the Sheetz Command Center in Claysburg, Pennsylvania, and you will walk through it and get to see how that operation works, and you'll understand why the profit margin is so small. Pretty impressive. Guys, that is a good place for us to stop for today. I will see you online this Friday. Remember, your assignments are due. And how do you get two bonus points on the first test? You go get your CS and do what? Take a selfie of yourself at the involvement fair and email it to me. Actually, you know what I'll do? I'll create an assignment in Chapter 1 where you can submit it, and that way I'll get your 2 bonus points. I'll create that today. I'll email you. But take a selfie of yourself as you go.